Sup with it guys, you got excellent name here, back again for my NPL draft analysis. Very excited to see this coming up. NPL minors, of course, I ended up with the 10th draft pick, which is kind of an awkward spot because it's pretty much right in the middle. It's tough to really build out your cores, and you know that you're not really going to get any of the top tier Pokemon. So I decided that my best bet for planning would just be to try to get as solid of a core as possible, like as solid of a team as possible, to try to have as well-rounded of a matchup spread as I possibly can. Try to have as many even matchups, nothing too polarizing. And I thought that would be the most consistent strategy to go with. So with that in mind, 10th pick we ended up with Latios. I love this Pokemon. You've seen me draft the Latios quite often, I'm sure. Just really solid, really well-rounded, versatile Pokemon. Latios is of course going to have a really good defensive utility just with its typing and nice bulk, alongside its obvious very strong offensive capabilities, especially considering I decided to Z-move this thing. It's going to be very good at that role. The common sets are going to be Spec, Scarf, Life Orb, and either Carmine or Dragon Dance with Z-move attached. You can also definitely run some bulky stuff with Roost Defog. It's not going to be as good as Latias at that, but it's going to be a lot better offensively, so I thought it was definitely worth a pickup. Definitely wanted to pair this up with Clefable. That's what I ended up getting next round, just because it's such a good bulky defensive Pokemon, very consistent, going to be good in pretty much every single matchup possible. Fable is well known for its Carmine shenanigans, especially in Gen 6. Of course, this is not Gen 6, even though my team looks very good in Gen 6. But yeah, it's going to be mainly there to just be the defensive answer. It's got Unaware if I need to deal with setup sweepers in particular, but generally speaking, it's going to be Magic Guard with like Carmine, Cosmic Power, maybe just a Stealth Rock set, because it is probably my best rocker on the team outside maybe Nidoqueen. Just a very good, versatile defensive Pokemon that pairs up well with the Lati. And then next we get Mega Sizzle. Originally I wanted to get Heatran in this slot because I really like the core of Lati Clef Heatran. Wanted to get that plus Mega Gyarados and Zero Aura, but Zero Aura went early round 2. It was probably too ambitious to expect it to last to round 3, and Heatran went early round 2 as well, I believe. So I wasn't able to get either of those, so unfortunately I did have to get Mega Sizzle. Definitely a very solid Pokemon, but it's one that I've kind of used to death and getting a little bit sick of. Especially considering I'm not like super versatile at using this thing. I generally run the same 4 moves every week, if I'm being honest. But it definitely does have the options. Very good defog option. It's gonna have access to Roost, Bullet Punch, Sword Stance, U-Turn for momentum. So it's going to be very solid at being both that offensive and defensive threat in many games. Not a lot can really deal with this thing, especially on offense builds. It's going to be able to set up +2 and do a lot of damage very quickly. Its Spadef is definitely quite solid, enough to take on most things in Power Fires, so it's pretty good Spadef Wall. Gonna be a lot better as a Fizdef Wall just because it's got the highest stats and doesn't have to worry about Power Fire quite so much. But very solid synergy. I definitely wanted to get my Fairy Dragon Steel core as soon as possible. And Sizzle does fit in quite well to give me the momentum for Latios. Deal with those fairies quite effectively. Unfortunately, just because it can't swap into the Hidden Power Fires from fairy types, it's not necessarily going to be as safe of an answer to fairies as Heatran may be, even though Heatran obviously does have the same problem with Hidden Power Ground. It's just not quite as big of an issue because you can run berries and air balloon to mitigate that issue. But next up, at this point, the main things that I wanted to get were taken. So I kind of transitioned into a Keldeo type of team, going really Gen 6, but Nidoqueen was definitely on the plan before. The backups for this were Gliscor or Mamoswine, but Nidoqueen was the one that I wanted the most by far, just because it gives me that Rocker and that Toxic Spikes. Just a really solid Pokemon overall. pretty threatening as well, just because of sheer force, life orb, boosted attacks. It's got really fantastic coverage, so it's very difficult to swap into this thing. It's, in my opinion, probably the best T-Spiker, just because it threatens out so many defocus and so many poison types. They really, like, it's such a risk to swap into this thing's T-Spikes that it's generally not worth it. Very consistent rocker as well. Unfortunately, it does lack that reliable recovery that if it had, it would probably be like very like 16, 17 point Pokemon, honestly. It's just so good at what it does. It's going to be able to stay in the game for a decent amount of time just because of its natural bulk, and it's going to give me that defensive backbone for the team. But next up, we end up with Volcanion. Keldeo did get sniped, surprisingly enough. There were actually 3 people who wanted Keldeo, which is something I've never seen before in a Gen 7 draft. Generally speaking, Keldeo is pretty safe to wait on just because it's not like a super sought out after Pokemon. But I decided that Volcanion would be an alright enough replacement for it. At this point, they were like definitely running low on water types. My other options, I think, were like Starmie, which is also pretty good, but I didn't want to have like the double Psychic on my primary Ice Resist so much. So yeah, I decided that Volcanion would be a little bit better. Now definitely a fun Pokemon to use. Really good stat distribution here. Got a lot of nice bulk. Its speed here isn't the best, but it's good enough to effectively run a Scarf on. It can definitely run those bulky sets, even though once again it does lack the recovery to do so, and it does have that rock resist, but rock weakness. But it does have a lot of good resists as well with the fire water typing, especially with water absorb giving me another water pivot. Not that I'm particularly water weak with my team right now, but it's obviously going to be best at being that just that wall breaker with its strong attacks. Fire water is pretty difficult to deal with if you don't have a good defensive dragon. My team doesn't necessarily beat dragon types like offensively super well. My answers Clefable and Latios, which is still pretty good. It's just that Clefable isn't going to be immediately threatening a lot of the time, so I can fairly safely swap around it. And Latios doesn't really want to come in on dragon types because, of course, it's weak as well. So yeah, that is a bit of an issue for it, but I do have a later pick that can kind of help that out as well. So yeah, I do think that this is going to be quite an effective wall breaker on the team. Unfortunately, its matchups are kind of polarized. It does often have fairly bad matchups, and for my water type to have bad matchups is a little bit unfortunate, but once again, all the water types are pretty much going at this point. But the next Pokemon that we end up getting is Decidueye, something that I really wanted to use for quite some time. Just a really cool Pokemon. Grass and Ghost typing is really nice to have. It's a defogger as well. It's got nice defensive stats with the roost and the typing. It gives me that ground resist that I kind of needed. Outside of Latios, I didn't have one. And obviously with Nidoqueen and Volcanion being ground weak, I definitely wanted to have this. It serves as a very solid pivot as well, as being solid on the mixed offenses with both Sword Stance and Nasty Plot. If I am so inclined, I can also run Baton Pass to pass those off. I'm not generally a big fan of Baton Pass, but it's definitely an option for me here. But mainly, I feel like it's probably going to be best as a pivot, giving me another defog option and that ground resist, or just as an offensive ring. But next up, we end up with Raikou, another one of those Pokemon that you generally feel quite safe waiting on, just because it's a fairly expensive Pokemon, and not like super sought over after compared to the other electrics, which is a bit weird. It's not Zero Aura, obviously, which is what I did want, and the main reason why I did want that is for the speed tier, but 115 is also a very solid speed tier to hit. Not quite as fast, but still very solid. And Raikou just does a lot of things. It's a fantastic Calm Mind Pokemon, especially with the T-Spike support that I have with Nidoqueen. Nidoqueen is of course going to be dealing with a lot of Raikou's issues, like the grass types in particular. But I am a little bit weak to the ground type, so that might be a little bit of an issue for the Raikou. But it can definitely also run like spec sets. Assault Vest is another favorite of mine. I can run Scarf if I really need the speed tier for it. It's got the strength behind it to do so. Screens are also definitely an option with my bulky offense team. It definitely can benefit from having screens up. So yeah, this is definitely solid pickup. I definitely wanted this for its speed tier mainly, and also just the fast electric type. Very solid pivot for the team in conjunction with Decidueye for sure to get in my threats like Volcanion and Latios. But next up we get Swellow. Once again, getting this for its speed tier mainly. A lot of the speed options were starting to fall, so I definitely wanted to pick up something quite quickly. Swellow's mainly gotten a lot better this gen because of the special attack boost. 20 special attack boost, I believe. It's very significant with Specs, Boom Burst, Scrappy hitting everything. My team deals quite well with Steel types, more or less with the Volcanion, and the Sizzle forcing them in to get Volcanion in is going to be very effective. Swellow once again kind of has some polarized matchups where if they don't have like good defensive steals or rock types, then it's going to go in, and if they do, then it's going to have issues. My biggest issue is that while it does have two very equally viable sets in theory with Guts Flame Orb, they're basically doing kind of the same things. They're going to have difficulty breaking all the same Pokemon, they're going to be doing the same things. So it's mainly just depends on whether I want to have that move slot freed up or if I want to have the longevity that Specs offers. And also, I guess if they've got like something like a Chansey or etc., then I can run physical instead. But yeah, it's going to be kind of that more niche bring, I guess, just because it does have the polarized matchups. But I really do like having something at this speed tier range. Unfortunately, it's just kind of not strong enough to run Scarf on it, which I generally like to have something fast to run Scarf on. But regardless, next up we end up picking up Mienshao, another really nice pivot for the team, especially with the Regenerator. Very strong fighting type, high jump kick spamming is going to be very prevalent on this thing. Quite versatile as well, it's got a pretty solid move pool, it can even run special, not super well, but it does have access to stuff like Carmine, Aura Sphere, etc. if I do want to do that. Just spamming Banded, Life Orb, high jump kicks though is going to be the main thing with this. It's got a pretty nice speed tier at 105-ish. Reckless high jump kick going to be doing a lot of damage, or I can have the regen for the longevity. I can be running like Assault Vest as well to make it a nice little pivot, and also running stuff like Safety Goggles is another thing. This is going to be a pretty nice pivot in for the Spore users. Just a lot of different options where it's going to be still able to effectively do the same thing, just filling in those different little niches that my team needs, which is stuff that I really like to have. And then finally we have the Sneasel here as our last Pokemon. This is going to help out the Volcanion a lot in dealing with the Dragon types. It's going to be pursuit trapping the Psychic types of Mienshao as well. I'm just a really big fan of Sneasel. I almost never get Weavile just because it goes so quickly, but Sneasel is definitely the next best thing. It's very effective at what it does. I decided to Z-move this thing because it was a 25-point budget, and this was the only thing that I could afford to Z at that point after Zing Latios. So my other options were basically Zing like Volcanion, Raikou or something like that. But I definitely wanted to have Latios Z, it just makes it such a better Pokemon. But yeah, Sneasel is definitely like a really straightforward Pokemon. It's going to be spamming Knockoff, Icicle Crash, Ice Shard, Pursuit, and then in certain matchups it's going to run Low Kick or Brick Break or Low Sweep or some other coverage move potentially, maybe Taunt, stuff like that. The Z move is just going to allow me to break things if I don't want to run like Choice Band and be locked in, or if I don't want to run Life Orb and get chipped down. I definitely do have that option there. Unfortunately, generally speaking, I'm going to want to Z Latios more often than this, so that will just depend on the matchups as to whether Z Latios is good, whether I'll bring Z Sneasel. But Z Sneasel is still quite solid. I can also run Eviolite for a bulkier set, just to have that longevity. It's not super bulky, but it's Eviolite is enough of a boost for it to live some things in certain matchups. So definitely a solid option there. I really like this team overall. This is the final thing. This final build here, courtesy of the NPL stream. This is the slide that was used for me. You can see all the point values there. I really like this team. Like I said before, it's going to have a lot of even matchups, I feel. Probably not a lot of like positive matchups in my favor necessarily, just because it doesn't have any big threats that just win certain matchups or anything like that. Um, Not a lot of weak teams are weak to Latios, not a lot of teams are weak to Sizzle. In today's age, people generally are better at building drafts than that. So that is kind of the biggest issue with the team, is that drafts are, for the most part, going to have good answers to all of my Pokemon. But my team, if synergizes well together, I can deal with all of those answers quite effectively. So I don't think that that'll be too big of an issue. It's definitely going to be down to how I play rather than matchups, though. How I prep around matchups is going to be very big on this team. Nothing is going to carry me through. I've got to be on like that every single week if I want to succeed. But you know, that's definitely very fun to have to do. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Week 1 should be going up on the 16th or 17th, I believe, whichever is the Saturday. So yeah, make sure to tune in for that. My week 1 opponent is I don't remember now, honestly. But you know, stay tuned for it anyway. See you guys next time.